of Life and Land, the Journey of Pinery Fire Recovery and the role of NRM. My name is Taryn Mangelsdorf. I'm based out of the Gawler Office for Natural Resources, and I work as a Sustainable Ag Officer there, so I do a lot of extension with Ag Bureaus. So I'm just going to run through what we're going to talk about today in a quick 10-12 minutes. About the fire, just to give you all up to scratch, this is the 4th fire in 3 years in our area, and you've heard about all of them already today through Georgie and Tom's talk, and this is complementary to their discussions already. What are the main issues? What are we doing about it? How are we doing about it, which is highlighted in Tom's talk, and where to from here. So the fire started in an area that we know now as Pinery, which is far left of your screen. It initially swept down towards Roseworthy, and then all of a sudden a wind change took it all the way through Owen Hamley Bridge towards Tarlee, Kapunda, Greenock, Freeling in Roseworthy. Someone's phone. Initially, it took out 82,500 hectares, which burnt in 5 hours, which is a huge amount of space in a very short amount of time. It started about lunchtime on Wednesday, the 25th of November, declared contained by CFS 2 days after, and controlled a few days after that. So this is the biggest grass fire and crop fire in the mid-north since Tarlee in 1996. Someone asked about terminology before. We're calling this a fire, not a bushfire, not a wildfire. So if that answers any questions or preempting what you're thinking already. So the statistics from this one are there were 2 deaths, there's about 90 injuries, about 91 houses destroyed, and about that many again are houses that are uninhabitable. A lot of farm buildings and vehicles are destroyed, including a lot of farm vehicles in that, and a significant amount of livestock. At that time, the fire, the majority of the landscape was in cropping at various stages of harvest, and mixed with sheep grazing, intensive agriculture with chickens and pigs. The other part of the management approach is that half the fire scar is in AMLR and half of it is in Northern and York. This partnership approach that we now have is managing the fire recovery efforts in shared attendance at events, supporting program delivery and joint use of resources. So we're going to go through 3 stages of fire recovery here. The first stage is in the first month of fire recovery, asking people what they need and responding to that. As Thomas first mentioned in his speech, they're essentially looking after their own health, making sure they've got somewhere to live, something to eat and something to wear. The second stage is 1 to 6 months in the fire recovery. This is where we started to gather a whole lot more information based on our structure that we had from Samson Flat, which we already could roll out quite quickly into Pinery fire recovery. We continued with our pop-up NRCs across the whole area. We had our own website as well as Samson Flat. We also had a Pinery fire recovery website. We had technical resources such as all the fact sheets and tailoring them once again to this fire and printing them out and having them really targeted with that messaging, really relevant to what they're wanting. We're also starting to roll out a lot of extensions through workshops, fieldworks, information sessions, everything else. Through this stage, we also have a lot of personal development in our own area. Where from Samson Flat and for this fire, we've done disaster management response, mental health first aid, a lot of native veg management, and Kate's here today and she also helped us a bit with plant ID. So, what are the issues with Pinery fire recovery? You've all probably seen the dust in the air. This happened almost immediately after the fire. You can see from this photo, Jay's nodding your head. Were you fighting it, Jay? Yeah, yep. So, and I think there's a few other people in the room who are fighting this fire. You can see that the fire is still happening, and you can see the dust that is happening from this fire already. And it continues to be a daily struggle out in the area. Not only for the loss of the fertile topsoil, the change of structure in the soil type, the safety issues of soil drift, the health issues, and many houses are now boarded up to make them dust-proof, but what type of housing arrangement does that make it? The crops and the stubble are completely removed, with no ground cover remaining. This soil loss is a major concern for all the local land managers or farmers who over the last 30-odd years have employed no-till farming methods and significantly improved their soil health through this best practice, which improves stubble retention and controlled traffic. Hot, windy weather after the fire resulted in an almost instant mobilisation of some or most of this topsoil. Due to the fire occurring at the beginning of summer, it will be some months before substantial soil cover returns. So what are the rest of the issues on top of the soil? There's non-wetting sands issues, there's fertility issues, there's lack of soil cover, therefore lack of soil moisture. There's livestock issues with available feed and pasture, suitability of paddocks, agistment and biosecurity, revegetation and regeneration, particularly of native trees, removal of Aleppo pines, which are a huge vegetation across the whole area, and it can cost thousands of dollars to remove each tree. Fencing and property planning, which brings on some opportunities. There's weed control with new weeds, seed banks and equipment. So if you're sharing equipment or if you're bringing in hay for your livestock, you've got to use containment areas for that. And pest animal controls, particularly with rabbits, foxes and mice are already coming out in the area. We'll be looking at abundant native species, which are kangaroos. And we're also working with different types of timing. So we're talking about the farm calendar year that they're about to put their crops in, so they want to get that timing underway. But we're also talking about people's own journey of recovery. So that's in their own time, and we can't dictate that, and that will go back and forth, which is expected once people have gone through a trauma like this. And with these issues, these are only issues that we work with. Not all the insurance, not with the housing, not with a whole another bunch of issues that they're also dealing with. So partnerships, what are we doing about it? All agricultural extension engagement is through our current relationships that we already had with a lot of these established groups. There are 5 agricultural bureaus that we work with and fund already. We're working with the sheep industry, so we've got Livestock SA and Mid-North Young Guns. Horse SA, we've provided them with a grant and they're doing some great work in the area with horses that have been affected. We're working with Partners in Grain to work with the farming women, learning from Eden Valley Fire, which Georgie has spoken about. A lot of the recovery was about the men and the ag bureaus, and the men would go out. What about the women? A lot of the women in this area are farming women, so some specific support and responding to what they're wanting. And farmer reference groups to keep making sure that our finger is on the pulse. We're supporting what they feel is the issue of the day and making sure that they're empowered that this journey of recovery is their own. And this is all in consultation with and collaboration with PIRSA, GRDC, agronomists, consultants, livestock agents, farming leaders and a whole other bunch of people in the area. So highlighting something that was in an earlier talk, let's talk about series of attitudinal change. What is practice change and how do we measure success? A lot of these people would have been measuring success by how much tonne they would have been getting off per hectare or acre from their harvest, or what's their lambing survival rate. Now they're going to have to re-look at their measure of success. A lot of what we're doing is taking them through the series of attitudinal change from ignorance to awareness to intent, where they make a decision and they convert and perform and maintain. This can take up to 5 years for them to actually go through all of this. And the big key here is understanding your audience. So from Samson Flat, we're talking 1,100 property owners. Here we're probably talking 250, but a lot of these are 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th generational farmers that are quite independent and really want to be doing a lot of things by themselves and self-sufficient. Here we have 250 odd farmers that came out 5 days after the fire. A lot of these blokes are wearing the only clothes that they own. This was a huge turnout from a lot of fire-affected farmers in the area just to find out what they can do with their soil, because the soil drift was a huge issue. You can tell by the colour of the soil here that it's quite high clay content. They've tilled it up, which we're calling emergency tillage, just to bring up some of that clay soil from underneath. This one here is a bit sandier. The clay soil is much lower, so it can't be delved up. It has to be spread on top, which is another management aspect that we're working with the farmers on. So just go through it. Delving is where it's like a rabbit warren river. You delve it up, you rotary hoe quite deep. Spread means that the clay layer is far too deep to bring up, so you have to find a clay pit somewhere else and spread it out like chicken litter. Another option here is where they've rotary hoed it or cultivated it, or probably 30 years ago, tilling, which was an old farming method, and spread hay across the area. And that's going to capture all of that soil drift and all of the rows that they're making. With livestock management, there's a whole lot of issues here. Thank you. There's business decisions, there's containment areas, so you're realigning your property. There's feed choice to making sure that you're not losing stock and losing condition. And at the same time, ensuring good nutrition around joining time and lambing time. We're working with a whole lot of council areas and NRGs around the area about providing free native seedlings to help replant the whole area, which is a huge job, but it's going to absolutely change up the landscape from what it is now, which is a barren landscape, to putting in some shelter belts to start stabilising the soil, to add some amenity in the area, for stock survival rates, stock shelter, and harbour for native trees in the area. Then after this, we'll be working on fire recovery for 6 to 12 months and for a significant time after this. And a lot of people are asking, what is recovery looking like? So a lot of these farmers, their recovery, as Tom has spoken about, as Georgie has spoken about, their recovery is intrinsically attached to the land. So once they've gone out seeding, which they're all trying to polish up their new tractors or their burnt tractors or their fire-affected tractors or whatever they've got from wherever, and then they want to see green and see the crops in and then be able to harvest it. A lot of them were interrupted mid-harvest, so they really want to get through the next cycle and feel complete from it. So speaking to them, this is when they'll be able to feel like they've taken a step in recovery once they've been able to go through these three. All right, so I've got some social media shots to go up, but have you guys got any questions? Yes? Clay, it's a stabilisation technique that you are putting a heavier soil type over the lighter sandier, and then before you start cropping, you'll turn it in at a shallower depth, and then it'll be ready for cropping. But you also got to be wary of what you might be cropping. You might not be able to do your peas or legumes. You might want to go back to wheat or barley that can break through some of those clods of clay that you might have or the uneven level that you might have. Yep.
After the fire, the advertiser ran an article about the risk being increased by a whole lot of farmers having the same crops at the same time, so that was just a very even landscape. What do you think about that argument, or is there any discussion about it?
It's quite valid, and this is where the difference between Samson Flat fire and this fire is that come Christmas again, the same fuel load is going to be in the area. So this is where our shelter belt tree project is going to come in, that we saw a lot of benefits, and the farmers saw a lot of benefits in having native vegetation on their properties, that it slowed down and changed fire behaviour because of that vegetation in the area. So if we can start building up the vegetation and have the shelter belts, working with CFS quite significantly in this area, a lot of people are talking about fire breaks. If you change up the wind pattern, you change up fire behaviour, then we can only hope to break up any future fires in the area, because that is the biggest question. What about the next fire? Sorry, microphone got excited. All right, any other questions? Yes?
You mentioned Aleppo pines. Were they largely in windbreaks out there? Or?
They were all over the properties. You might be talking some properties had a couple of hundred on them, and they would be around your roundabout at home, there'd be your stock shelter and your containment yards, there'd be along roadsides, there'd be dividing up paddocks. So some properties might have a few of them, some properties might have a couple of hundred. The thing with the pines is that I'm going to crudely describe how they're not going to recover. Pines grow from the end. If you've got if they burn off the end, they're not going to keep growing, so therefore they're going to die. And the other part is that if they're near houses or sheds and they fall over, they provide a hazard or a risk. So you really have to work out, I guess, in your priorities, because everyone's got so many priorities that have to work out in their recovery, what goes first. And so they're really trying to make sure that there's no more risks or hazards in the area by removing those pines that could drop at any time. Any other questions?
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.